You know how sad it is, John? We have Hope for Afghanistan. We have all these hope for campaigns that we do for communities that we serve facing genocide or trapped in total war. The fact that I had to launch a Hope for Hawaii campaign is surreal.
Hi, and welcome to the stream. We've been covering in various ways with various writers the natural and governmental disaster that's happening in the great state of Hawaii. Our good friend and contributing writer, Jason Jones, actually lived in Hawaii for more than 30 years. And he is back in Hawaii now with his organization, the Vulnerable People Project, coordinating aid to the citizens there who have been so grossly neglected by our government and are currently really suffering. Jason, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
John, it's good to see you, and it's great to be on the show.
I see your background there. I'm guessing this is not one of those $1,000 a night hotels that FEMA representatives have been reported as staying in. Where are you staying?
I'm actually in Honolulu today. We're loading up charter planes with supplies. I'll be back on the ground in Maui tomorrow. In Maui, I have a tent and a rucksack that I brought with me, so I don't have to. The last trip we stayed in a friend's house, but it was 30 minutes each direction. So this time I'm just going to be going with the tent. But no, I'm in a $160 a night hotel. It's not that bad. In Honolulu, again, because we're loading up charter flights.
So have you seen those reports about FEMA executives staying $1,000 a night, like the Four Seasons?
Yeah, not only that, are they staying there? By the way, I didn't see it. I saw one car that looked like a 4-year-old had used tape to write FEMA across the window. You could barely read it. They had spelled FEMA with, pieces of tape on the back of a car. That was the only sign of FEMA that I saw. And maybe I should spend more time I would like to spend more time at 1,000 a night hotels, but and I'm sure that they will be billing FEMA their normal rate. I can't imagine that's not going to happen. And I do know that at least it's being reported. I've had horse blinders on. I've been focused on setting up the logistics to get aid in from the very first hours after the catastrophe, loading planes, unloading planes, loading trucks, unloading trucks, loading boats, unloading boats. But I hear a lot, and I heard that families were displaced by FEMA officials. And the tragedy of that all is, up until this point, 99% of the aid, 100% of the aid I saw distributed came from small charities like mine and from the Hawaiian and Kama'aina communities. I didn't see any FEMA distribution. I did see two old fellas in Red Cross jackets at Walmart. I went to get, being an ex-infantryman, I know how important morale is. So I wanted to surprise the children with ice cream bars, and the adults would give them each a beer. And so I was showing the Red Cross what this Catholic apostolate gives out. Of course, we've given out most of our aid has been the life-saving necessities. And we're also focused on helping with the burials. But yeah, I haven't seen FEMA. I've barely seen Red Cross, although I've heard that Red Cross is reaching people with aid. But yeah, it's catastrophic. Most of the aid has been the heroic effort of the Hawaiian and the Kama'aina communities from across the islands that to get past obstruction set up by the federal government, by FEMA. We've had to do
boats. Wasn't FEMA turning away boats from other islands that were bringing supplies?
Yeah. So what we did is we brought the boats offshore. Then we had, and I sent you the video. We had guys on jet skis running shuttling it back and forth to bucket brigades of people lined up on the beach to load them on trucks. And so it's strange that you have to subvert the people who are there to help you in order to distribute aid to the people who need it.
Isn't there some very powerful Native Hawaiian tradition of communal support? Is there a special word for that?
Yeah, there's a lot of words for it. One of them is kuleana, that it's your responsibility. I felt when I was back home in Texas, I moved here as a 17-year-old boy, and my children come from Kama'aina families. And I felt that it was my responsibility, no one else's, to do what I could to help Maui and Lahaina and the families of Hawaii. And there's that strong sense of solidarity Hawaii is a community. It's a very conservative state, which a lot of people find hard to believe because of how they vote. But there's some historical reasons for how the Democrat Party sort of got into pole position and maintained it.
Well,
And
didn't you say the Republican Party in Hawaii was taken over by pro-abortion rhinos aligned with like Planned Parenthood eugenics?
yeah, well, and yes, there's been a mistake after mistake. So, for example, in the early 50s, Senator Inouye, as a young man, wanted to run as a Republican. He didn't want to run as the Jim Crow Party, the party of internment, being a Japanese American. And he, was part of the movement that built the Democrat Party, the machine in Hawaii. Then Tulsi Gabbard's father, Mike Gabbard, was basically drummed out of the party in the early 2000s because of his strong support for traditional marriage. So Tulsi Gabbard's dad became a Democrat, which led to, Tulsi became a Democrat. And in the 90s, the Republicans almost maintained the majority in the House. Can you believe that? In the state House. And then Governor Linda Lingle sort of swung socially to the left, even emceeing a Planned Parenthood fundraiser as governor. And sort of the Native Hawaiians and the Filipinos, the Pacific Islanders, the Tongans, the Samoans, the Chinese, all these people that have a traditional cultures, a communitarian conservatism. It's not a radical individualist conservatism as we see in the Anglosphere. You have to remember that this is a Pacific Islander and Polynesian culture with a lot of, Japanese and Asian culture as well. So that's all, it collides into, it's a communitarian culture and it's a communitarian conservatism, but there's been this disconnect between our conservative movements lacks the ability to sort of speak to the people of Hawaii. And the Democrat demagogues are just willing to mouth anything.
Right.
And they've been overseeing the sweeping away. 50% of Native Hawaiians no longer live in Hawaii. We have the highest cost of living. The starter home cost $1 million. And we have the lowest pay. So you're making the least amount of money, paying the most for your when my wife worked at a bank here in Hawaii, she said they had average home had 7 co-signers on a mortgage. Well, you couldn't even do that in the mainland. But here you couldn't sell a home unless you did that. So you have a lot of people living together. And what I really believe that we're seeing is the globalists, the elite, systematically and intentionally wiping away the Native Hawaiians, wiping away the Kama'aina, made up of Filipinos and Portuguese and Okinawans, Chinese, all the mix of people that were brought here by the globalists 100 years ago to work in the sugarcane fields. They're now no longer necessary because they ripped ag away. Then they became a little pesky and started climbing up the hierarchy and wanted to control their own destiny. And now they need to sweep them away, bring in a transient servant class. And the Democrat Party has overseen that. And the Republican Party of Hawaii has been impotent in fighting it and resisting it and communicating to the people of Hawaii. And then now we have this disaster in Lahaina that really, to me, is a culmination of a regime that is addled by ideology and not it's responsive to ideology and to distant powers, and not their constituents.
So what I'd like to do right now is, because this is so confusing and there are so many rumors and so many different sources of information, and because we've learned not to trust the mainstream media, because if we had trusted it, we would have already taken the dead baby vaccine and died of myocarditis. So good thing we didn't trust it. Can you just give me a bit of a timeline of what actually happened, what caused the fire, and let's talk about some of the crazy decisions that are getting reported. First of all, do you have a good handle on what you think started the fire?
I do. And by the way, again, I will say that I think maybe most of you watching this, and you, John, yourself, are probably a little more in tuned into what people are talking about on social media and in the media than I am, because I've really been on the ground in Maui with my nose to the grindstone, trying to distribute aid, raise money. I'm driving, unloading trucks, driving to unload trucks while begging for money from donors on the phone.
This is through your organization, the Vulnerable People Project, which people can find at its website and can help.
Yep, thegreatcampaign.org, and we have the website hopeforhawaii.com, hopeforhawaii.com. If you donate at hopeforhawaii.com, 100% of that goes to the efforts here in Maui.
Okay.
So here's what we know. We know this. We know there was a fire. We know that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are missing. We know that the media is trying to hide those numbers. Initially, they reported 8 people, and they called it a brush fire. So tourists kept flying to Maui, swimming in the same oceans around bodies that were floating dead. And the locals were horrified and thought that these tourists were so insensitive, when the truth is these tourists were lied to and had no idea that they were flying into Maui's 9/11. And I've been calling it Maui's 9/11, Hawaii's 9/11 since the very first day I arrived here, and I saw the wreckage. And as you know, John, I've been in war zones from Sudan to, I just got back from Ukraine and Iraq. The only thing that I can compare this to, nothing that I've ever seen. No, I was in parts of Ukraine that had been devastated by Russia, but the building structures were still there. And this was just all of Lahaina town. It was just as if a tactical nuclear bomb went off. It looked like Dresden or Tokyo after the firebombing.
Wow.
The media is not telling the truth about the numbers. I think we also know that the Wall Street Journal reported that Hawaiian Electric, which is largest owner, is BlackRock. A Wall Street Journal reported this week that they were in New York City looking to protect themselves from liability, I'm guessing, through bankruptcy protection and reorganization.
These are the people who didn't maintain the power lines, didn't cut back the brush, didn't make them safe, and said they weren't doing it because they planned to move to green energy and they didn't want to put money into this old carbon-based energy. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So here's what we know. We've all seen the footage of the power lines being blown down and fire starting. Now, here's my question. John, you know this. I've been asking this to everyone in interviews I do. I just gave you a hint. When you driving through a part of town, what is the first sign that the elected officials, that the powers that be in that county or that town or that city can care less about the people who live there? There is something that you see. If you see this, don't send your kids to that public school. The roads are going to be a wreck. There's one thing, the police aren't going to patrol properly. What is the one thing that if you see this, oh, the elected officials don't really value the people who live here? What is it?
Oh, gosh.
I'm going to give it to you.
The fact that they're Democrats would be one.
No, because if Democrats in affluent neighborhoods won't have this.
Okay.
If the power lines are above ground, the city and county officials can care less about those people. I guarantee you, in nice parts of town, they bury those power lines. You're in a poor part of town, or you're in a part of town that the elected officials are not responsive to the needs of the people when those power lines are not buried.
You know what? I live in a part of Dallas where the power lines are above ground. And if you cross Greenville Avenue to where my girlfriend lives, Highland Park, they are not above ground. So I can verify what you're saying.
And I know that you're dating above your weight class. So that's good.
Definitely.
So here's the deal. That those should have been buried. Beyond that, they didn't clear the brush. Why? Environmentalism. They didn't release water. Why? Environmentalism.
Now, let's not just blow past that.
Okay.
Let's discuss that.
Okay.
How is it environmentalist to leave brush around so it can cause wildfires? How is it environmental? But how do they tell themselves that this is being environmentalist? Are they punishing the community because it hasn't switched to green energy?
No, they do this all over the country. Wildfires are down over the past 20 years dramatically. I think they're down 1/3. So there's this sense that the wildfires are running amok. Well, the reality is we used to do breaks. There would be breaks to stop the wildfires from spreading.
What is a break? It's an area
where they burn, they go in the fire department. I remember as a child watching fire departments go out and do controlled burns so that they would have these breaks that fires can only go so far.
There's they burned away all the vegetation so that it can't spread. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we're not doing these controlled breaks anymore. You have above line power lines. They're hoarding the water. And again, it's not. Look, I'm an environmentalist. I care about clean water, clean rivers, clean lakes, and clean streams, and clean air, clean earth. There's no more conservationists or even environmentalists. There is the green lobby and its useful idiots that has
The
nothing
climate
to
cult.
do. Yeah, the climate cult that has
It's
nothing
all
to do.
climate change now. They don't care about clean air, clean water. It's all about climate change. And it's not about preserving human life, because human lives have carbon footprints and are changing the climate, right?
Yeah, we're all polluters because we breathe out plant food. So every time I exhale plant food, I'm destroying the planet, I guess. The first thing they did was they ran to climate change. The first thing out of their mouth. The climate change lobby caused this. I'm hearing a lot of grandiose conspiracy theories. I don't know, but I know we don't need them.
Right.
I know we have the climate cult. And you know, you know about this, John. In the late 19th century in Germany, they were getting back to sort of these pre-Christian their pre-Christian roots and early Germanic poetry and dancing around the maypole. And it seemed really harmless. And who would have ever imagined a bunch of well-meaning Germans wanted to dance around a maypole and recite pre-Christian poetry, Germanic poetry, would lead to the Thule Society, which would birth the Nazi Party, which would lead to the hell that was World War II. Well, you know, in the early days of Al Gore and his nonsense on the climate cult, who knew that it would smother the true conservationists and environmentalists, which don't exist anymore? They're gone. So they can pollute away the rivers, they can pollute away the lakes, they can pollute away the streams, they can rape Africa to get rare earth elements for their batteries, and they can use young African children to do their dirty work for them. No one is out there speaking for them. No one is out there speaking for them. Lahaina was destroyed, and hundreds and hundreds of people have died, probably disproportionately children, God forbid, because we have politicians that are more responsive to ideology, to BlackRock, than they are to their own tutu, to their own families.
Let's talk about that. BlackRock, which owns the power lines that weren't maintained, that probably caused the fire. BlackRock, which also makes money every time there are deaths in Ukraine. BlackRock, where James O'Keefe caught a BlackRock recruiter on video saying every time they blow up buildings in Ukraine, our stock goes up. Yeah. BlackRock is also behind these ESG scores where if a company doesn't go along with transgenderism for children or doesn't go along with some other leftist policy like promoting abortion, they give it it takes a financial hit. So they pressure companies to do things like hire Dylan Mulvaney at Bud Light. They pressure companies to do things like Disney is doing, promoting sex education to kids. So this is really all the wildest conspiracy theories about globalism. We don't need them. This is real. BlackRock is it's like a James Bond villain, orchestrated it and other companies like it, big capital, woke capital. They really are orchestrating incredible societal damage and getting rich in the process. Is that accurate?
Yeah, social disruption. So they're disrupting communities, they're disrupting families, they're creating chaos so that they can exploit them. You know, the idea that you have a BlackRock employee, this James O'Keefe, look, in Hawaii, yesterday, someone had they secretly recorded, I don't know who the government official was, but there's a video that's now trending out there on social media of a government official from Maui County in a golf cart, and someone's secretly recording him on video and an audio. And he breaks down crying. He's a big, strong-looking guy, but he breaks down crying, saying all it was about was rushing through permits to rebuild on the outskirts of Lahaina. It's all about, he said, the holy mainland developers. Not one word was mentioned for the people. And that's the disconnect. I mean, I remember being on a call with the White House. I still get invited to these White House calls. I don't think they know who they have on these calls. And after in the weeks after the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, I was on these Afghan calls. that were never about Afghanistan. It was so bizarre. They were about LGBTQ plus this and climate change that. And I'd be like, when are we going to get to Afghanistan? And it was a call I was invited on where they said they were going to discuss Afghanistan. They never got to Afghanistan. And so I can imagine this Native Hawaiian city and county official is in there with the governor. He said the governor was there. And he's like, when are we going to talk about the people? It's like when I was in Ukraine and I was talking to one of these defense industry lemmings, and I was trying to talk to him about the well-being and security of the people of Ukraine. And all he wanted to talk about was U.S. federal money and weapon systems to purchase. And I told you about it. I said it was as if Tulsi Gabbard had written the script and wrote this guy up. And to think that Josh Green is in there, and if you watch the press conference with our government officials and Biden, they don't even pretend to care about the local people.
Yeah, Joe Biden shows up and says, well, I think I know how all you people's children died in the fire's field because my Corvette once almost caught on fire. And then he falls asleep. It's the most amazing thing. It's like they're not even doing a very good job of pretending that this guy is running the country.
No, they don't care. Look, our governor and our U.S. Senator Brian Schatz, who is literally the biggest twit in Congress. This guy, Brian Schatz, is unbelievable. And every press conference, he's in the back and he's got this silly smirk on. And it's kind of a silly, like uncomfortable smirk. And if I'm being charitable, it's probably the same weird smirk that I had in the 8th grade when my great grandfather passed away and it was my first funeral. Like it just kind of like a nervous, uncomfortable energy. But he's got this weird smile the whole time. And then Josh Green and Brian Schatz, the line of gesture of their talk, of their press, of their short, and they didn't speak very long compared to the president, was, hey, we're open for business. They literally said the rest of Hawaii is safe. Why don't you just come on down? Like, really? This is 9/11, guys. Yeah. This is not hyperbole. Do you know, John, the average year in Maui County, between 1,100 and 1,300 people die in a year of all causes in Maui County. So we will double the deaths this year in Maui County. You know, could you imagine in New York City, if on 9/11 you had how many New Yorkers die in an average year? I don't know what that is, but you would have that many casualties in one day.
You said it earlier, it would have been like 800, as if 800,000 people died on 9/11 instead of the 3,000 who tragically did die. You know, if it hadn't been for the firefighters and the policemen, 30,000 people would have died in those buildings. They saved 27,000 people.
Imagine if Giuliani got up there and said, hey, this is the Big Apple. No, imagine if George Bush showed up and talked about, this reminds me of the time I made a Tinker Toy castle. And my grandpa, who loved Planned Parenthood for no reason at all, came over and kicked over my Tinker Toy castle. And then Giuliani got up there and said, I want you guys to know that we have great shows and Broadway is open. Come on down. That is what they did. And it has been sort of my great frustration. I was chairman of the college Republicans here, and I was chairman of the young Republicans here, and the Hawaii Republican Party is a mess. It's always been a mess. It's never communicated in authentic, they've never articulated an authentic, powerful alternative to the Democrat Party in the 30-some years I've been here. But it's just so frustrating to see the Democrat Party soccer kick the state of Hawaii again and again and again and again.
Wasn't Hawaii treated really hideously during COVID? That's why you and your family finally had to move out?
Oh, it was unbelievable. Yeah, no, John, my first time back to Hawaii was after 12 months. We left in the first 3 months of the lockdowns. My friends thought we were nuts. They said these lockdowns are going to end. It was basically 18 more months of lockdowns. I came back a year later because a friend of mine who collapsed into severe depression, who's a very outgoing, warm, and loving guy, committed suicide. There was a suicide epidemic here that no one will talk about. In our old neighborhood, a 9-year-old boy committed suicide.
Wow.
Left a note that said, I miss my friends. I miss my friends. Of course, the media never reports on this stuff. One of my college roommates saw me walking down the street when I was back for the funeral. He had not known that I left. He was an HPD police officer. he pulled over, said, jump in the car. And I said, well, I have experience jumping in these police cars here in Honolulu, so I'll get in the back. And I got in the front, though, and he said, Jason, we're having jumpers every day here in Waikiki.
Wow.
The lockdowns here were a menace. And I'll say that the police officers, and I'm going to go into some I don't want to bring division, and I don't want to bring in politics, because right now it's a very tight-knit community. And, we're all very angry.
Now,
So
weren't there also trucks from the electric company blocking the streets, preventing people from escaping the fire?
I don't know about that.
I just read AP just reported that. AP reported that electric company trucks stopped people from driving and walking away from the fire.
Well, I'll tell you what I do know. I didn't read that, John, but I'll tell you what I do know. It's even more disconcerting than that. The Hill reported that the Maui police turned people away who were trying to escape the fire and sent them in the wrong direction. And an elderly man was interviewed by a Maui news source, then it went trending. And he said, the only reason I'm alive is because I ignored the police. And then I go back to COVID policy. You had these police enforcing irrational and illegal orders that went against the safety, health, and best interests of the people of Hawaii. So our police have been trained to act thoughtlessly. I really believe that if we would have successfully pushed back against these stupid COVID policies, that maybe the police would have been not so quick to thoughtlessly send people away from safety. I don't think that these police are wicked. I think that these police are banal. This is what Hannah Arendt talked about in her essay on the Eichmann trial for Vanity Fair. It's the banality of evil. They were just doing what they were told. They didn't think twice. And for this courageous people that ignored the police and said, I'm going this way because this way's safe. And those people lived, and those people who listened to the law enforcement officers died. So a lot of the things that I was trying not to listen to while I was unloading planes and unloading boats, and my friends were pinging my phones and reporters were calling me and asking me about it. And I said, my line was, which is still my line, we're focused on caring for the living, burying the dead, and keeping Lahaina local, keeping Lahaina for the Hawaiians, keeping it for the Kama'aina. But with the latest revelation that the police sent people to their deaths, the police prevented them from saving themselves. And these police are part of the community. My heart breaks for them. My heart breaks for them.
But doesn't that resonate with you with what happened on January 6th? Police let people into the Capitol, and then those people who the police let in are being prosecuted for sent away to prison for years and years for just doing what the police seem to be telling them they could do.
Yeah, well, the people of America are going to have to wake up, and the people of Hawaii are going to have to wake up. And this story is being nerfed. They're really trying to slow bleed the facts. If the people, there's something special about Hawaii. It's not our beaches. Everybody, there's beautiful beaches everywhere. There's beautiful palm trees everywhere. There's beautiful sunsets everywhere. But in Hawaii, you had this beautiful kingdom of Hawaii that by 1850 was the most Christian place in the world. You had, through the accidents of globalism, Filipinos and Chinese and Okinawans and Vietnamese and everyone coming here and intermarrying. And aloha to me is the gospel reflecting through the Hawaiian community and then through the Kama'aina. And now we know that is aloha. It's really the most beautiful, unique community on earth. And people of the world love the people of Hawaii. And we need to stand with Lahaina. John, I founded the Vulnerable People Project over 20 years ago in Hawaii. We have patches for everywhere. This is our hat. Wherever we serve, we have a Hawaii patch because we're founded in Hawaii. We work in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan with the Uyghur. We just rescued Christians from Sudan. And all of our team members, they wear different patches in different parts of the world. So we're rescuing nuns. They're wearing the Sudan patch. We're working in this summer, we've had operations in Nigeria, Malawi, Sudan, South Sudan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Ukraine to rescue vulnerable communities.
So basically, the Vulnerable Peoples Project, you are trying to push back against all the cruel side effects of globalism and global greed and
From
insensitivity.
Lahaina, yeah, the idea that I had to make Lahaina patches is unbelievable to me. I would have never imagined. I would have imagined Honolulu, like this is target number one in World War III. But I never would have imagined we would be making Lahaina patches. I said to my team today, I said, look, we're breaking their narrative in Ukraine. We saved the lives of the people they abandoned to death in Afghanistan. Now we're really ample. I will say it's our little Vulnerable People Project team that early on was amplifying what the heck was happening here. And I said, I wonder if I'm going to have a Prigozhin end, because we see it everywhere. You see it in Ukraine, an utter thoughtlessness to the hell on earth that the people of Ukraine are suffering. No mention of a ceasefire. No one's advocating to bring this war to an end. You have General Milley saying, we want a 20-year quagmire. The National Review last month cover story, Putin's quagmire. Congratulations. They have a quagmire. They have an endless war. They have children losing their limbs and their fathers, and young men losing their lives, young women being trafficked when you have a great displacement of millions of people trapped in dangerous and deadly industries, worst of all, the sex industry. And they don't care. You have our Afghan allies, 150,000 of them still in Afghanistan waiting for their visas to be approved. They don't care. They didn't care about our Afghan interpreters who were facing certain death. They don't care about the young man in Ukraine who's fighting in a mud trench right now, and a cluster bomb. There was all this talk about cluster bombs going into the Ukrainians' hands. Well, Russia's been dropping cluster bombs on the Ukrainians since day one. They don't care, and they don't care about the people of Lahaina.
They don't care about, and these are Americans. Do you see?
These are Americans, and these are the most. Yeah.
Do you see Hawaii being, an island community under one-party rule? Is it almost being treated as a lab for how much they can get away with doing to Americans and without any political consequences?
The way they treated Puerto Rico, the birth control pill studies were done in the 60s in Puerto Rico, killing countless hundreds of young Puerto Rican women. In the early 2000s, my alma mater is the University of Hawaii, and they were doing tests on new abortion pills, new morning after pills. And the only university in the United States that participated in the study was the University of Hawaii. So you wonder, yes.
They choose the vulnerable as guinea pigs. Have you heard talk of social score tracking coming out, being used, being weaponized, like BlackRock's effort to use social credit scores? Are they doing something connected to this disaster?
I haven't heard anything like that. And, I was last in my class in high school, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity of being last in my class again. I'm sure if they're giving out social scores, I'm going to be, maybe you'll be a little bit beneath me, John, but
because you're trying to actually save human lives. So you're multiplying carbon footprints. What's brilliant about the climate cult is it allows you to sort of shrug at the deaths of helpless human beings around the world, because human beings are the problem. This may be the most uniquely evil worldview ever to emerge on the world stage. The Nazis at least pretended to want to help the people in Germany. The communists at least pretended to want to help the workers. The climate cult actually says it is against the human race.
Yeah, but don't misgender them. Don't use the wrong pronoun. That's right. What is it, Stalin, that said, one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic? Well, right. With the climate cult, it's a million
deaths is a good outcome.
A million.
It's a good start. A million deaths is a good start.
No, here it is, John. I want to finish. It's like a million deaths is a good start. To misgender someone is a tragedy.
Yeah.
It's the first world problems are the only problems. You'll appreciate this, John. I was asked to speak at a library recently on our book, The Race to Save Our Century, and on the work of the Vulnerable People Project. I was literally asked to speak on genocides. And I wanted to speak in the most sanitized language I could. And I talked about being in Iraq with the Peshmerga during the battles against ISIS. I talked about and being in those recently liberated villages. I talked about you just coming back from Ukraine. But I did it in a way that I would talk about it in front of my 6-year-old granddaughter. Okay, this lefty lady, probably a Quaker, said, I really didn't appreciate your torture porn. And so then I said, oh, Oh, you thought that was torture porn? And then I literally gave her torture porn. I said, let me tell you what I saw, the way I saw it and the way I remember it. And then they had to listen to me for 30 minutes, unload torture porn. No, we're obsessed with ourselves. We're thoughtless to others. I founded the Vulnerable People Project to harness the power of the conservative movement and the pro-life movement to advocate for vulnerable communities who were placed in impossible situations. Like at the time when I founded it, the Chinese trying to evade forced abortions, the minorities in Iraq that I thought were doomed to suffer if we invaded, which ended up unfortunately unfolding the way that I saw was going to unfold. The people of Lahaina, there's 13,000 of them. Well, 12,000 of them, God forbid, left. They're devastated. Everything is gone, and they're fighting the wealthiest, most powerful, well-connected, and well-organized entities in the world. They are in an impossible situation. We need to stand with them. I'm not on Twitter or any of that, but there's people are hashtagging keep Lahaina local. We need to stand with the people of Lahaina to care for the living. We honor the deceased by caring for the living. We honor the living by caring and honoring the deceased.
Isn't one of your projects to raise the money for the funerals for the thousands of children?
Yeah, well, not thousands, but hundreds. Pray God that's not the case, but we're preparing to do what we need to do. We've already the families that are identifying, we've been inundated with calls. They've been really hard calls to take, where daughters are crying, saying, "Will you help us, even if we don't have a body?" Because they're not going to have bodies, right? And we're like, "Of course, we're going to help you." So we have to care for I think the very best thing that I can do right now, as the large aid organizations are setting up, the most important thing that I can do is stand with the people of Lahaina, to bury the dead. And then we have to fight to keep Lahaina local.
By that you mean stop BlackRock from buying up all the land cheap from the fire that they caused?
Yeah, keep Lahaina local for the Hawaiians and the Kama'aina. Kama'aina are the children of the land. They are the Filipinos and Okinawans and Portuguese and Hawaiian. They all intermarried, right? And they've been there and they've earned a place, and that's their place. And I'm an Anglo. I am. My Hawaiian friends say, "Jason, you're Hawaiian in the heart." I say, "No, I'm not. I'm English in the heart." Because when I moved here at 17 and I walked off the plane, I looked around and said, "Oh, I'm home." And that's what we do in Africa and the Falklands and Ireland. We just show up and say, "I'm home." But sometimes it's hard for those of us who are Anglo and are rootless. Well, my roots are actually here. I moved here at 17, and this is where I feel my roots are. But, I hear people saying on social media, well, they can just move no, they cannot just move. This is their home. And it's their home. They're not going to go anywhere.
What kind of conservatives want people to totally abandon their home, their community, their heritage, and just pick up and go live somewhere else and forget your ancestors?
Oh, we did that in Iraq, didn't we? We did that in Iraq. I remember talking to a Yazidi. I was in a refugee camp and kind of thoughtlessly said to the Yazidi refugees, "So are you hoping to go to the United States?" And the guy looked at me like I was an idiot, because I was an idiot. And he said, "I want to go down the road 12 miles to where my family lived for thousands and thousands of years, where his family lived before Abraham left his community." And so I think it's hard for those of us who have moved 6 times for our careers, and our parents have moved 3 times for their careers, and their parents moved twice for their careers. We're kind of become a rootless people, but the people of Lahaina are not a rootless people. This is their home, and we need to fight to help them keep their homes. And they are devastated. I'm talking to them, and they're broken. One woman asked us, "Will you please just manage my GoFundMe account? I can't even get out of bed. I don't have the energy to even open up my laptop. Can you please manage our GoFundMe campaign?" And that's when I said, no, we're going to fund your father's funeral completely. Don't you worry about that.
In the midst of all this devastation and all this sinful behavior by the powerful against the vulnerable, do you see God moving? Do you see evidence that the Christian community, the churches, are being part of the movement of God to push back against this evil?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the lay Catholics, not the Knights of Columbus are here and they're working hard. The diocese is trying to find its footing and serve the people. The lay Catholics here have risen up, but it's not been the institutions, it's been the people.
How about the other churches? I heard King's Chapel is given 10 acres to build long-term housing.
If I'm going to say one community that really stepped up more than others, it was the water community. It was the waterman community. It was the watermen and the waterwomen.
Who are the watermen and women?
The sailors, the surfers.
Okay.
It was this community came together. They used their sailboats. They used their sailboats to sail from Oahu to Maui. Then the jet ski companies, their employees were shuttling products from the boats to the land. So I would say that it was just the locals. It was the people of Lahaina. You know, they're the ones that did it. And when John, this is like what I do in Afghanistan or Iraq or Ukraine. We knit together the communities. Then we want to amplify their voice to the world through our instruments in the media and politics and government. We want to run money to them. And that's what we've been doing here. And so we've been working with the local groups the same way that we were delivering food in Afghanistan or evacuating SIVs. We weren't sending in Navy SEALs, right? We were working with Afghans. And here we're working with people who own boats or own planes, and they're letting us charter their planes. PepsiCo is sending 80 pallets of water. I think they probably already have arrived. That was through a friend of mine who's a restaurant owner. So that's that Kuleana. Like this is my responsibility. And, you know, the other groups, the FEMA, the government, they can do what they're going to do. But I can tell you the people of Hawaii, and this is one reason that a government's been able to abuse them, I think, so much, is they're so focused on caring for themselves and each other that they don't really even look to the government and to pay attention. Not that they're radical individualists or libertarians, but they're so communitarian. They're so much focusing on grandma, grandpa, cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, friends, that they're not even looking past that to see how the government's menacing them. And I would say the same thing here. The government not only sort of was MIA, but was in the way. And they were like, whatever, we got this. And they really did get it. And, you know, the other place that it reminded me of was in Poland. In the first days of the war, the people of Poland stepped up in a way that was really unbelievable in Ukraine. The way that they absorbed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians in a way that was very hospitable and charitable. Well, I would say the same thing here. The way the locals took care of each other is something that the media, this is where I don't get, where is the media? This is just for news. It's a 9/11 level tragedy. Imagine Katrina. Well, Katrina, we couldn't escape Katrina on the news.
And George Bush was blamed for everything.
If Trump was president, listen, I wanted Romney to be president for one reason, so that the drone war would stop and the liberal media would discover that we were using our drones to blow up wedding parties and, you know, kindergartners. And, you know, if Trump were president, this would be the biggest news story in the history of the world. It's one of the biggest stories in the history of our country. But everything is political now for our media. It's really sad that we cannot count them to even cover a catastrophe like this, honestly. And a lot of the conspiracy theories that are really just multiplying every day around Maui, it's from the dissembling of the government. They just simply cannot communicate clearly and honestly. For example, how many people have died? Well, we've only been able to identify 7, 12, 15, 115 bodies. But we suspect we're not going to be able to find many, if not most of the bodies. And there are almost 1,000 people missing. So please pray. But no, every step of the way, it's dissembling. Every step of the way, it's covering their own akole. Every step of the way, it's about hiding the truth instead of clearly communicating the truth. And so what this leads to is all sorts of conspiracy theories. And, you know, we're finding out there's a lot of fishy business. There's a lot of fishy business. You would think there'd be one person in the government in Hawaii that would just do his own press conference, go out there and clearly tell the truth. Tell the people of Hawaii the truth. Tell the people of the world the truth.
Has Tulsi Gabbard been active? What's she doing?
Tulsi Gabbard, unfortunately, I think it's a great tragedy because she's got a very strong voice. She is on a military deployment right now.
Oh,
So she was able to leave the deployment and fly here for, I think they gave her 24 hours to go and assess the situation and go and then turn around and fly right back to her deployment. But, you know, she's an officer. She has a command now, and I think it's their annual drill, I believe. So I know Tulsi enough to know that this is addling her.
yeah.
Tulsi and I share something in common, that, you know, our work on the national stage is always ordered to the care of Hawaii. You know, John, our book, The Race to Save Our Century, was birthed as an undergrad at the University of Hawaii who was addled by the idea that Hawaii would be ground zero for World War III, and that everyone I loved and everything that I would look at every day would in the next 50 years be wiped off the face of the earth.
And now we're seeing it be ground zero for the New World Order, for Build Back Better. They're going to build back better in Hawaii, and it's going to be BlackRock buying up all the land if it's not stopped.
Pray God, no.
We're running low on time. I just want to remind people, Vulnerable People Project. What is the website again, Jason?
So go to hopeforhawaii.com. Everyone who does $250 or more will get our hat with a Lahaina patch. And this is a Sudan patch. I apologize, but this is Hawaii, but it'll be a Lahaina patch. And it's important because we want you to wear this hat to tell people to remember Lahaina, to remember Maui, to remember the people of Hawaii, and share with them what has happened. I've been shocked that people are messaging me about movie projects and this and that, and I'm like, oh, I'm in Maui, sorry. And they're like, oh man, lucky you, I'm so jealous. And I get very angry. Like, wait, what? And I'm like, don't you know about the fire? Like, yeah, there was a brush fire or something there. And they're texting me.
They don't know. The media's not telling them. So
Let me ask you a question for you. So I've been over here working. Are you telling me that there's really, to this day, the media has not giving this the attention it deserves right now to this day on the mainland?
It's getting less attention than the Trump indictment and the fact that Rudy Giuliani has just had to go to jail. And, you know, they are doing their best. The monkeys are throwing their poop at the wall to see what sticks. That's how the media work. So we're going to do our best to amplify it. So people, please pray for Maui. Please go to the Vulnerable People Project, hopeforhawaii.com.
Hopeforhawaii.com. You know how sad it is, John? We have Hope for Afghanistan. You know, we have all these Hope for campaigns that we do for communities that we serve facing genocide or trapped in total war. The fact that I had to launch a Hope for Hawaii campaign is surreal.
Yeah. And this is part of America, folks. This is the Hawaii today is your hometown tomorrow under the kind of government that has been imposed on us, that doesn't care about human life, doesn't care about human rights, doesn't care about the laws of God or even the laws of man. Thank you very much, Jason. God bless everyone. See you again soon.
Thanks, John.